acknowledge it?
Okay, I didn't know. I was waiting on
I
another.
didn't know what we were.
I am not Andrea Sikora. She had a family emergency, and so I'm gonna try to pinch hit for her and answer your questions as it relates to what she's projected. I will tell you that we have been in conversation with the city, and Dave Sullivan is really an expert in IT, and the city has a partial ring. We need to look at collaborating with them to complete the ring around the city that will allow all of our schools to have free internet access. And so as we move in that direction, what she's projected in the budget includes a position that would help us with board approval, work more closely with the city to align resources. I won't say shared services, but try to make sure that we get the full benefit as we migrate to Microsoft Office, as we give all of our schools internet access, and as we move in the direction of providing a 1-to-1 ratio for our children. The numbers that she's provided reflect a 10,000 laptop or computer increase for our children. It includes the refreshes required to maintain our current technology, and it includes the new student information system, the maintenance that's required to run that. It includes Cox internet cable. It includes upgrades to our existing systems and maintaining our existing systems. And the amount is what you see. I would add under E-rate, in order to receive the E-rate that we've applied for, we have to have matching dollars, and that's what that amount is for. And I will try to entertain any questions that you might have regarding the IT budget.
So, have we correlated this is $8 million each year. Excuse me for stating obvious. Just in case you're wondering if I could read. Have we correlated this to student outcomes?
I can tell you, I'd like to respond in two different ways.
Okay.
One, everything that we do with regard to the Virginia Standards of Learning is highly contingent upon our students' ability to access and use technology on a daily basis.
Right.
And so in order to maintain that, Andrea has given us a projection that she thinks will allow us to get to where we need to be. We pretty much in some schools kind of dismantle what we're doing with IT. And so all we can do during the administration of the SOL is test. And so we're trying to move away from that so that as we test, our children can continue to use technology on a daily basis. And, you know, we're better off in some schools than we are in others. We did conduct an audit, and so we fully understand and have documentation that will support the ratio of student to computer. So we know that now, and we are 10,000 computers away from where we need to be.
Have we looked at, I want to say I'm sure we have, but I'll ask it anyway, partnerships with companies that could help us without having to come out of pocket with this kind of funding? I mean, 'cause this is
Pretty steep.
Yeah, and I know technology is expensive.
Yes, yes. I like your question about partnerships, and we, hopefully, as we continue to work closely with the city, Microsoft, I know we talked about a partnership last year, and they will give us free opportunity or free access to Microsoft Outlook. We will be using that partnership to migrate over to Microsoft Outlook in May. So that's going to cost us a lot less because of what they provide to education. When I mentioned the ring around the city that Cox Internet has provided so far for the city, once we get that in partnership and in collaboration with Cox and the city, that's going to benefit us and reduce this amount also. So yes, we should look at more partnerships, and I think that by working closely with the city, we can get there.
Yeah, I commend you to working with the city. I think that's a smart way to go, because I do think we'll see some cost sharing, cost benefit as a result of that we don't see necessarily in this document today, because this document's from July of 13 with a bit of a date relative to that one position. But I do think that we don't really know quite yet until we start working more closely with them to know what the opportunity cost is going to be. So I just encourage us to continue to move in that direction. And again, community partnerships, and not just in IT, but we're talking about community partnerships in a lot of things that we're doing. open campus, transformation, et cetera, I think that's just a charge that we have across the board that, under the strategic plan, that is huge, and we need to do what we say we're gonna do.
Just two questions. One, under the business information services, there are several notes related to internal staff to perform needed work.
Where you run?
At the top of the page, it says network services, and it says business information services.
It's page 3.
And if you go to the far right column, under notes, it references internal staff. I don't really, are the staff costs in here, or is this just hardware, software, and maintenance? Because couldn't figure out the staff needs a year.
The staff costs, she told me last evening that they were included. I'm not looking at the sheet that you're looking at.
That they are, or they are not?
They are included.
Okay.
The additional staff, that she's understaffed and does not, we are sharing services with IT maintenance in our buildings, and we don't have enough staff to go around. And so it includes an increase that she projected would help us meet the needs of our schools.
Okay, because I just didn't see any numbers there. So
You
I
didn't
just
see the
wanna make
numbers?
sure.
She
At least-
told me
at
that
least-
she.
At least on that page. So I'll take that, or if you can just verify that.
I will verify it.
And then the second question is, we've talked, you just mentioned again about the importance of having the technology infrastructure to support the teaching and learning and the testing. And there are several schools in here, I guess all the high schools and some of the elementary schools that still don't have the wireless infrastructure.
Right.
What is it gonna take to get that done now? Because as you all have discussed it and presented it before, you've said to us that this is a important need in order for the children to have what they need, and the teachers to have what they need for there to be academic success. And as, you know, Poplar Halls is still on the list.
Yes.
Sewell's Point still on the list, Bayview, Calcott, and on. In these discussions, are you all having or prioritizing, at least in that particular area, what we have to do right now to get that solved, and what it's gonna cost to do it?
She has projected her numbers on this. She's doing her work on a 4-year plan. And so Poplar Halls is listed in phase 1 as a for example. And even though we are quite aware that Poplar Halls does not have the bandwidth as other schools have, they do have wireless carts, which will give them the ability to test. But because they are on that stagger, that's the reason why Poplar Halls, for example, doesn't have the technology that other schools have. What's it going to take to get us there? We just did an inventory, we did an audit, and we have the numbers, and we're looking at ratios, and that's our next step.
Well, I guess for me, I would appreciate it if it's part of the discussion going forward, if you all could at least present to us what it would take to get it done in this next cycle. I don't know what the stagger is, but to me, it just seems,
Defined cycle, do you mean this year?
This year.
I mean, I would love to get it done now, but obviously.
Before testing.
That hasn't happened, right. But if there are some schools that, based upon the assessments that you all are doing, that you think need something right away, if that's the case, I think we should know about it. But at least in terms of what you're projecting for next year, I don't know how far this stagger goes, but I would hate to see the case that some of these schools just continue to wait and wait and wait and wait. So I don't know how that's factored
I can
in.
assure you that within 2 weeks, she and I had a meeting the day after it snowed to go to Poplar Halls, for example. And those schools that you mentioned, she and I are going to make personal trips to talk about the numbers from the audit and to talk with principals and the testing assessment staff to figure out what it is they have to do to administer the SOL and try to verify what we need to do to get where we need to be. Your deadline for coming up with a number to get us where we need to be right now, is that out of next year's budget?
So whenever the superintendent gives us his recommendation, I'd like to know, at least have that part of the discussion.
Can have that in 2 weeks.
Okay, go ahead and do it. The 10,000 computers, does that stagger through that 5-year plan, or is that How soon, what's the acquisition date?
I know, I think it's staggered, and I know she's got a refresh built
But
into
those are
that too.
refreshing, okay.
Yes.
It's
All right.
2,000 computers per year to meet the
Okay,
level one.
I missed that. All right, thank you.
So, quick question on the position that might be funded. Is there enough money in the budget right now to fund a position to hire somebody?
No.
So we wouldn't be able to hire somebody until July, post it and hire July 1?
Of course, contingent upon budgetary approval.
Which
Right.
position?
Position.
What's the
The
position?
IT cost sharing.
Yeah, IT cost sharing with the
The
city.
cost sharing position.
Oh, the integration specialist?
Yes, the integration specialist position. And I would add to that question that normally there is a chief information officer that runs a school district. And that position was here in the budget years ago before I came, of course. That position no longer exists. So Andre is doing a yeoman's effort, doing all of what she does as she tries to create a vision that a normal CIO would try to provide. So this position will really kind of take the place of that at a lower cost. That sounds like a salesperson.
What is the position called again? A
It's-
chief?
I don't think it's cheap.
It's a specialist, no, it's an integration specialist, that's what we're calling it.
But you said the position that we had a couple of years ago.
Chief Information Officer.
Okay.
That's what most major school districts have.
With respect to Mr. Jordan's earlier question regarding personnel, this document does not include personnel, but Andrea did include in her operating budget request for next year approximately $900,000 to fund additional positions. It looks like she's asking for 19 school-based engineers that would be delegated to the schools and allocated to the individual schools at a cost of about $800,000. And then the position that Dr. Simmons referred to, the city school shared services integration specialist, $90,000. I guess that will be our share of it. And then she's also asking for another engineer. So she does have a request in for additional personnel.
And is the 19 associated with the SOQ piece that you mentioned to us before?
No.
So isn't there some SOQ
Correct.
liability? we
The
have?
actual instructional technology resource teachers would be different and above the engineers.
But in your gap that you described for us, that's built into that already?
No, only restoring 5 of the needed 18 is in that gap. So that $14 million gap assumes that we would fund 5 of the needed 18 ITRTs
To bring us in compliance.
to begin the process of demonstrating to the state that we need to get in compliance.
Closer to
We
compliance.
need 23 more ITRTs to be in full compliance.
Is that in this document right here?
No.
No.
No, okay.
We don't
So
have the document he's referring to.
Oh, okay. All right. So the personnel that's needed is 33 information technologists and
23 additional ITRTs or instructional technology resource specialists or teachers. What we have included as a part of that, what is a $14 million gap, is adding 5 of the needed 23.
okay.
And-
So how
and-
much is? Go ahead.
And that, when I mentioned the context for the last 5 years, fiscal year 10.
Yeah, y'all cut them. I'm sorry, we cut them.
We cut it. We were, as I understand.
We did cut it.
As I understand, we were in full
Sorry.
compliance.
I
And
was
we cut
speaking
them.
at the mic at that time.
Yeah, I mean,
Just like we make decisions to cut things that have a legacy impact, we also make decisions to add things that have a legacy impact that we can't sustain. So, yes, we cut, as I understand it, we cut these things. And now we've got to add them back.
Well,
So-
go ahead, sorry, go on.
all right, just to clean up this point here. We have 23 information technology resource specialists. And for next year, we're looking at hiring 5.
Currently, we have 5.
Currently, we have
In the
5.
budget, in the current year, we have 5 on staff, as I understand
We
it.
have
In
5
order to
on
be
staff.
in full compliance, we need an additional 23, which
Okay.
would bring the grand total to 28, because it's 1 per 1,000 students.
Okay.
The
And
current, go ahead,
in compliance with what?
the state,
SOQ.
SOQ, Standards of Quality.
Okay.
They should be funded it.
They fund their share,
Right.
But it's not
Well,
what we
I
share.
see what they share.
based on composite index. So, Mr. Jordan's question was, of the $14 million, would that fully restore the additional 23 ITR? The response is no. It only includes 5 of the required 23 additional, at approximately 80,000 per. So right now, the $14 million gap includes adding 5 at approximately $400,000.
And we get the 14 million from the state?
No.
SOQ?
No, we won't get any more money from the state because they've already funded it. We're just not in compliance with the funding requirement.
And those positions at the district level are called DITs, not ITRS. We call them District Instructional Technology Specialists. So the 5 that we have are called DITs. That's the acronym for them, District Instructional Technology Specialists. I don't know why, but that is what they're called right now.
Okay, Brad, and then,
Yes, just one more after that.
So our share of this shared person. with
Integration
city-
specialist.
The integration specialist is is how much?
90,000 is what she's budgeted. And that.
Our share.
Yeah, but that
Can I apply?
position. We needed a placeholder, and we needed to be able to track
Right, well,
somebody that.
I'm trying to get true numbers. I mean, is that a $180,000 position?
Oh, no, it's 90, overall 90. So that person will,
And why are we paying all of it?
it's our person that
I thought
will
we're sharing.
collaborate with the city to create an environment for shared services.
sharing
Okay.
services.
So what you're saying is a dedicated
So
resource
we pay
that's
for it and they
under
get to
Dave
use it.
Sullivan that would be solely purposed for the school
That's the way it
system.
sounds.
Right, working between the two.
In order to facilitate.
Maximizing how we spend money, maximizing what the vision is for IT, and how we
Say
blend
$90,000.
services between the city and the district. All based upon board approval and input.
But again, that's not included in the $14 million gap. At this point, those are add-ons to the current base budget that's not factored
Not in
into
there.
that 14 million.
Okay, so,
None of these are at this point. I just bring us back home.
okay.
Thank
So-
you.
So 2 questions. Where in the world of our budget discussion do we see what's above and beyond the 14 million gap? Where's the document that shows all that at some point?
Well, the idea was that after we've gone through this process with the board and get some direction from the board, then we would look to include that in what will eventually be Dr. King's recommendation. Right. But if you were to take a snapshot of the different 5-year outlooks you've had, and the year 1 cost would be roughly $11 million on top of the $14 million gap. If we were to implement the year 1 of these different plans you've heard today, not including RECs, we're looking at an additional $11 million because you're talking about $650,000 for, you're talking about $4.4 million. You haven't heard the early learning yet, but you're talking about $4.2 million for early learning. You're talking about $500,000 to $600,000 for professional development. You're talking about 4.4 as a minimum, not including the personnel, for Andrea's request. So that's how we get to an 11 million on top of 14 million.
That's for all of these categories.
If we were to begin year 1, yes,
That would be for the fiscal year 15?
correct. We would go from a gap of 14 million to roughly 25 million.
Okay.
If we did the above and beyond.
Right. So 2 things. One, I think it's important for us to see that list itemized, okay, kind of separate here from the main budget, so to speak. And I know for me, it's important, and to Lonnie's earlier point, and I think we mentioned it with regards to maintenance and facility as well, is that we begin to tease out what one of my professors in seminary used to call the biblical knowledge, the good to know and the need to know. And so I know a lot of this is good to have. What do we need to have? I mean, I think we really need to see the critical areas here. I know for my budget, I like to know the difference between money for Virginia Power versus that for cable. I don't know how much of this may be cable, direct TV. You know what I'm saying? But I think in order for us to be able to really make our point to the community, we have to be able to identify essentials for meeting the goals of the strategic plan, realizing our vision as a district, becoming a world-class system.
And if there's some way in that document that she could also incorporate, if some of these dollars are specifically going to priority or focus schools,
Okay.
that would be very helpful as well,
That's a
because
good
to me,
point.
that's a critical issue and a very time-sensitive issue that we need to be implementing now, or at least within the year.
Absolutely.
What-
And I think we also need to make sure that everything is on here, which I presume, so, most certainly gonna think I'm stating the obvious, but this is aligned with the strategic plan, okay? Secondly, have we accounted for the carrying costs when we bring on 10,000 new units, 2,000 per year? Have we considered the carrying costs for that in this figure?
Yes, the maintenance cost, there's a sub-line item that takes care of that, so she's taking care of that.
But for everything across the way, carrying costs and technology are huge. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to have an aha surprise with licensure fees or something else down the road that we didn't think about in this $8 million fund.
Okay.
And then I think actually in that document also, we also need to have a column of where we can consider cuts. Because I'm going to ask you a question about my access and Achieve 3000 at some point today, and I'll just ask you now. You know, so Achieve 3000, we saw a presentation at Lake Taylor where we saw a figure of 30,000 plus of licensure students that have license to have access to it. How many are actually using it? How many days a week are they using it? How long in a day are they using it? Is it contributing to the curriculum? Is it contributing to the instructional time? What's the ROI on it? Are we seeing an outcome as a result of it? That's the kind of programmatic questioning we need to ask. Do we need all those licensures for Achieve 3000? Is it appropriate that it be from K to 12 or 1 to 12? Does it really need to be K to 8? Do we not need it really for high school because there are other things in place that achieve that same intent? So I'll ask you that question now because perhaps we're carrying too many licenses that are not being used or maximized.
I
So-
can take full responsibility for providing you with that data, that report.
And I would say for my access and Achieve 3000. So again, that goes in the column.
And
of
other
where we
programs
consider-
like that, I mean, when
Absolutely.
we talk about program analysis, that's the two most recent ones that we know we, purchased, using, but I'm sure there's scores of them that we've had for years.
Yeah, so we've got to take a hard look at our current programs and are we using them to the greatest potential, and what is the ROI and what is the outcome, and do we see achievement, academic achievement as a result? And if not, then we don't use them.
This process always calls for very tough decisions, plain and simple, and when we start off with the kind of gap that we're starting with, and then we're looking at all these other district leads, and we haven't even gotten to, 3 or 4 other important categories.
And I appreciate everything the board members have added, and I think from a process standpoint and a document standpoint, it makes sense and it's rational. But we've got an immediate challenge, and that is just bare bones, we've got $15 million gap before we add any, whether you want to call them nice to haves, we should have always had them. But we've got to break this down over the next couple of weeks into a manageable process.
We better hurry and do so, because it goes up another $1 million every time you mention it.
Oh, yeah. $14 million. How do we get there? What's the pathway to get there? To deal with $14 million,
Right.
short of any additional revenues. And then on top of the 14, these are other things that are not included in this budget, which would be the $10, $11 million. But to keep this process that we can get to the finish line in the next couple of weeks, we've got to say, how do we balance a $14 million gap? And then this is what we did to balance that. Now, these are other things that we don't have that we need.
Right.
Right, this is reality.
So let's not lose sight of the immediate urgency of the 14 million.
Right.
Because those are where the tough choices are going to be made. And again, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but there is not a pathway to get to $14 million after 5 years of similar cuts without considering the portion of the budget that represents 85% personnel.
How many more retirement incentives can we?
We realized the 1.1 that we had programmed last year for this year.
Yeah.
So we get that again, so now we're down to 12 million, or 12.5 million. So we've got to be prepared by way of perhaps sharing with Dr. King and us. Do we present a balanced budget based on reductions? Or do we present does he present a balanced budget based on reductions? Or does he present a balanced budget that has a gap where we're asking the city for additional money?
I think we have to see both.
Yeah, and I look at the purpose of this discussion as first looking at what reality is. Reality is facilities, reality is technology needs, reality is safety net needs. And then once we get the big picture, then we can say, all right, well, that's the big picture, and now this is what we're looking at. We have to look at our budget from last year, chop off 14 million, and then figure out what we need to do from there. But the city needs to know what we're looking at. They need to have a very clear picture, and for anybody who's viewing this and getting to stream it, they need to hear this, because it's very important for everybody to have that big concept. And then we can start doing what we need to do as far as getting that $14 million gap closed.
And I agree wholeheartedly. When I preface my remarks, that's why I said we have to do this, but let's not lose sight of the immediate challenge that we've got to address and the tough decisions that we've got to make over the next couple of weeks to at least deal with FY15 in the context of what we need over 5 years.
Sam and Brad.
And I would like to remind all of us of last year and the fact that we went forward with quote-unquote unbalanced budget. Then we made some modifications and presented that modified budget. I want to avoid that whole rollout where it appears that we got one budget that's the superintendent's budget and then another budget that really should be the budget. So if you all recall the way that happened last year, that's not preferred. So if we're going to go this route, let's all be on the same page about what we're going to do. If we're going to go with closing that $14 million gap and present a budget that reflects that gap being closed, and then over here saying, however, here's the option 2, which would position us to do X, Y, Z.
Well, that would be the part of your strategic plan budget.
But it's much different than.
Right, that's true. That's a good point.
Than the former.
You're right.
So I don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, you're right, Sam. Brad.
I just want to make sure that we understand that what you're talking about, Noel, are two different budgets. One is the operations budget, one is CIP. We need to make sure that we have a clear understanding that what we're presenting to City Council is the operations budget. And we tell them what we need for CIP projects.
That's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to your point,
We don't
Sam,
mix the two together.
which is a good point, is that the budget should reflect absolute needs and essentials for fiscal year 15. And then that means there's a X $1 million shortfall there. It should reflect what we need to fulfill the strategic plan for fiscal year 15. You all follow what I'm saying? You know, disagreement there because
Yeah. As long as we continue to be transparent about what our needs are even beyond next year, so that we are
Right.
sharing with the community, which is what Noel's saying, and I fully
Yeah.
agree, and with everyone, exactly what our needs are.
No, I agree.
Versus just saying we don't have the needs because we can't afford them. The needs still exist regardless of whether or not the money's there.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
That the proposed superintendent's budget should be a budget that reflects the need of fiscal year 15, regardless of whether it shows us.
Balanced over or under. Right.
And I don't want to keep belaboring, and I'm not contradicting the board and Dr. King. I think Dr. King and I are probably on the same page, but with that being the case, okay, if we find a pathway to take 14, bare bones 14 down to 7, then is it are we saying that, Dr. King, bring a budget that would balance with an additional $7 million from the city? I mean, that's the question.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, of course, we have to do our due diligence, even in looking at, what's proposed to us, and so we may go back to some of these questions about some cost-saving measures as we consider that 7.
And are we saving enough, and are we looking hard enough?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I was just gonna add, because I was gonna ask this at the end anyway, because we keep talking about being aligned with the strategic plan. I'm just gonna ask again that we know we had some baselines we were establishing. We know we had some targets, and we know where we were trying to get to. I still believe it is extremely important in trying to make that case that we can give a snapshot of where we are at this point in time of those numbers, because it's one thing to talk about them in the abstract and say that they're aligned with the strategic plan. It's another thing to put the human face on it and say, this is where the performance is, and this is the analysis that we've done as part of that cost cutting, to say, hey, maybe there were some action plans that we cut out, but these are some things that are critical to student success that we need help on trying to get there. And then it's clear, if we, for whatever reason, can't find the help, that we can then communicate what we think that's going to do in our pursuit around our goals and our priorities. I think that we have to have that qualitative information to go along with this.
Okay. So I think some up on technology. We have, actually, in time we committed to, it's only about 40 minutes left and a good deal more agenda left. So I should say more agenda left than time we had committed to this. So we have open campus, CTE, early learning, and one of the things that was left off of the list was HR. We did receive information relative to salaries from Dr. Birdsong a couple of weeks ago, and I think that should be a part of this consideration as well. So, right now, where it stands with everything we have left, we will not end at 5. I don't want to wait till 5 to talk about what we do next. So, do we want to agree to go ahead and extend the time now?
I think we should. I know people are concerned about safety too, but I think we are having a good conversation.
Right. Okay. So, yes.
Brad?
I'm leaving in 15 minutes.
Okay, so, all right, so we'll push forward.
Are we saying till 6? Are we saying?
We should cap it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the recommendation? I mean, let's say 6, and let's work really, really hard to get there.
Knowing that the last 15, we still want to talk about agenda.
Yes, yes, yes. So we got to have a central, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, open campus,
Can we do early learning or CTE before that? Oh,
Okay.
it doesn't matter.
okay? Open campus,
We're going to do the open campus budget.
budget, yes.
And Mrs. Martin, you have that?
I do. Space down there. Let me go get it.
That's it.
Actually, I've got it. No, it hasn't changed, but I didn't know if you all had hard copies. It might be easier to follow than on your screen. So this is the document that you've seen. This is the document that was in your packet when you reviewed the information that Dr. Simmons presented at our last meeting. Essentially, it's intended to outline the estimated annual cost over a 5-year period for the program. As you all know, at this point in time, the estimated costs in years 1 through 5 exceed the estimated resources or revenue in an average of about 1.2 million. Next year it's $1 million, and then it escalates as the rental of the proposed facility comes online. Any specific questions without, again, going through the numbers themselves? The year one gap, this $1 million, is included in the $14 million operating budget gap.
So that's
It
included.
is, at this point.
Say that last.
The $1 million gap for this plan, this program, is included as a part of the $14 million overall operating budget gap that we've been referring to.
Right, right.
So we've already identified $1 million to pay.
No.
No, okay.
It's adding to, it's part of that $14 million hole.
Okay.
It would be 13 without it. And the major assumptions in this plan under operating expense, you can see there in the third section, or boxed section, the major operating expenses, of course, would be the program fee to Edison Learning, Magic Johnson, Bridgescape. I've got MBJ, but it should be the other way.
Yeah, I was looking at.
And that's based on $3,200 per student. And year one, I believe, is just above that. It assumes 250 kids, 170 of which would be existing NPS students. The balance of 80, for illustration purposes, would be returning students who would qualify for in our ADM. Some of the other operating costs, you can see MJB represents what is included that Edison, Magic Johnson, Bridgescape would assume those costs as part of that fee we're paying them. Then we would be expected to provide the furnishings for the facility. This is an estimate based on the assessment of the building itself, where it is, and the number of kids that will be coming online in year one. The transportation services, of course, that's kind of a moving target. That's a variable that until we know who the kids are, where they're coming from, and what impact that's going to have on transportation, this is considered to be a placeholder somewhere in the middle of the minimal cost and perhaps the maximum cost as provided by Mr. Kleinbell. But again, that's going to be a moving variable. And you won't know that until we see who the kids are and where they reside.
Okay. Noah and Brad.
We had initially discussed the fact that there would be a daycare attached to the facility. Is that anywhere?
That would not be factored in, and there is an on-site daycare with the building where we intend to house the open campus. And somehow through working with teaching and learning, if there are children that need to be housed or attend school at the daycare, we're going to try to work that out because there is space available.
And will we maybe work with United Way or any other organizations to help?
With the funding?
Funding.
Yes, we have several partners that are helping us with funding. Once the board approves the open campus program, then we will be going with our partners to try to generate all kinds of funds. Community in Schools is one. They're going to help us. United Way is going to help us also. I just submitted a grant, for example, for $500,000, a little bit over that. We fully anticipate to get that money through the Department of Labor. The state of Virginia has offered $500,000 that they will give to the program. So we already are looking at money, I'm sorry, $50,000 that they will give to the program, thanks. And so we're already looking at monies coming in, and we have barely started. So I'm very optimistic about monies that we can raise once we start.
Brad?
Two questions then. First, to follow up with what you said, Dr. Simmons, that money is automatically goes off our bottom line operational expenses?
Not all of it, no. It will add program services. For example, the grant that was written will provide a person that will help in many different ways to manage the program that's being funded by the Department of Labor. It could indeed replace one of the positions if we think it might be suitable that we have up here, but we're not far along enough to know whether or not that person could manage the grant and do that too. The $50,000 does come from the bottom line.
And the custodial services, that we didn't put an estimate on how much it would cost to maintain the school during the...
I think the initial thought was that Mr. Gay
He just left.
and his area would provide those services within its existing staffing, is that?
Yes,
Well,
that's,
the note down here says the cost estimates above do not include support ops such as food, custodial, and facilities. So I think there's still expenses associated with that,
Yeah,
to
there
your
are.
question.
That's
Um,
the question.
yeah, with school nutrition services, Helen has advised me that there will not be an additional cost, that the presence of the students will generate the revenue that will maintain providing, offset the food costs. According to Rex, he is hoping to work very closely with us to provide custodial services within his existing staff.
I think that one item we need to consider, of course, there are some variables that may be beyond our control. However, you have to understand that we have students that are currently in our schools already, the middle schools. So X number of those middle school students would attend open campus. We have students that are already on our high school roles. X number of those students would attend open campus. The process that should be utilized from an allotment standpoint would be that once we identify those students and have the agreements that those students will attend, then you quantify the number of students from middle school and their location, and you modify the allotments for that school. Let's just say a middle school has 25 students that will be removed from that middle school to attend open campus. Just for rule of thumb, let's say that that 25 equates to one teaching slot. Well, that teaching slot is then transferred and allotted to open campus because you've just taken 25 students away from that school. So no longer does that allotment need to be assigned to the middle school. So when done correctly, you get closer and closer to a balance in terms of cost. And so now, at the high school level, it's not as clean.
But given that scenario, there's no new money.
No. What I'm saying is, that does not have to be new staff either.
Right. Okay.
It's when we do our allotments.
Right, I'm with you.
Yes.
Which is reflected here.
Right.
The million is assuming that we won't have to add additional instructional staff because they would come from some of the middle schools, as Dr. King, or perhaps high schools, as Dr. King mentioned.
Now I'm confused. So is the $1 million in addition to the allotment from those students that would be moving?
Correct.
Okay.
If we had to go out and hire additional staff that we're not anticipating transferring in, we would add another $250,000 to $300,000 for the needed 5 teaching positions. Is that clear?
Okay, any other? Yes.
Quick question, 425,976, first column, estimated differences of expenses over revenues. We're covering that in this year's budget?
Where are you quoting?
Literally the bottom line.
The bottom line, the 429,976.
425,976. Year
Yes.
1 FY 14.
420.
And the budget summary,
Yes. We have to cover
Yeah, so we have that in the budget this year.
this. No, that's
Well,
part
that's
of the
different.
$14 million gap.
Exactly.
That's,
What-
we have a
that's different, yeah.
ours is different, wait a minute.
This is what's on board docs.
So what's on board docs is,
Look right there.
Okay. Sorry.
All right. On my old copy.
It's the document dated January 8th.
What is your?
It's on the whiteboard.
It says $1,024,000.
Oh, okay, so sorry. I was looking at a different
yeah,
document.
I was too, I was using.
The one that you
mine.
have is the one that was included in your packet that was presented
Okay.
at the January
Okay.
8th meeting?
Yes, yeah.
Has the program model changed?
Okay.
Some of the other cost assumptions had to change. It's a year, now it's expected to be a year-round program with the potential waiver being approved, so. But this version is the one you had when it was officially presented in January.
Yeah. Yeah,
is there any need for additional clarity on what you have as the financial plan assumption?
Okay, so like Ms. Doyle, I was looking at the previous version. So just bear with me for a couple of seconds. So in the previous version, we had the program fee for Magic Johnson Bridgegate at a total of $333,000. And then in this version, the January 30th version, is $800,000. So, what happened? Did just the number of students change?
The number of students is
Yeah.
making.
Do you still have it up?
Which
Do you
one?
still have it up?
My
The one that
original
has
one?
the, yeah.
Yes.
What number did you have?
But it didn't
Well,
have
we
numbers
800
though.
now?
Oh, yeah, this is
When is
going
the
back
next
to
one?
November,
November.
which is
That was
probably
November.
very early. Well, I think we were assuming maybe 100 kids.
Different
maybe?
model, yeah. It was a
So
different
the
model,
number of
yeah.
kids have evolved, has grown, the structure of the program has grown, so that November version may have been the very first iteration.
Okay, so let me ask this question. From the core Magic Johnson Bridgegate model, can you give me a sense of the delta between the core Magic Johnson Bridgegate model that can support open campus versus the Norfolk Public Schools enhanced model that is inclusive of Magic Johnson Bridgegate? Magic Johnson Bridgegate has a program in Durham that they're doing something,
Right,
but it's not necessarily open campus.
right.
We've taken that core model, layered the open campus principles and features on top of it, right?
Right.
Because the core Magic Johnson Bridgegate model would not meet our open campus goals.
Well, no, because we're striving for, they treat a different population. We're striving for college and career success. We're striving to serve a population of students that have been virtually ignored. And in the Durham area, for example, it's still a fee of $3,200 per student. That's what they charge. But they are a school within a school treating a different population of children. It is not an open campus. This will be the first open campus in the state of Virginia.
No, I get that. I'm just trying to figure out how to close a gap. I'm trying to make sure I understand how we get there. So I'm gonna ask it again about Norfolk Technical Center. So I know you said that something about not wanting students to mix. But I think we also have seen some programs leave there. Have you all actually taken a look at Norfolk Technical Center to see whether or not there's sufficient space to absorb the open campus that may, if so, result in some potential savings perhaps around the staffing cost? So for example, we have 2 security officers that need to be at a different building. If we already have security officers that we're already paying for at Norfolk Technical Center, whether it's during the GED program at night or the regular school during the day, is that a potential place where we could save if we could fit it there? I mean, you're absolutely positively sure there's no school that we currently have that's in existence that we could fit this first year of the proposed open campus within that existing framework?
And Dr. King probably has an answer for you in that regard, but I'll pitch it while he's collecting his thoughts.
If it's no, it's no. I just want to.
I have taken a clinical walkthrough in DC. I've gone into all of the classrooms. There is some space available at NTC, but there is not enough space available to support what we're striving to do with Open Campus. We not only want to build a program, but we want to put in place an infrastructure for something that will grow. So we're starting with 250 students. The biggest bang for the buck for us will be with pulling in dropout students. That's where we get our new revenue. So I'm hoping that next fiscal year, even though we have projected 50, if this is implemented and it goes really well, we might add on 50 and pull in maybe 50 more dropout kids. As a for example, if the numbers show that we can build base better that way with the SOQ formula. Did you follow me?
The returning MPS student that is currently at 80, those are the students that are currently outside of MPS that we're bringing back in, correct?
Right.
So that's what you refer to as dropout students.
Right.
That's the 80.
The 83.
The 170 are the ones that are either in our middle school that are overage for grade, or in our high school that we don't currently feel have the necessary credits to get what they need to get in the time that we need them to get them. That's the current 250. In the proposal, we talked about another cohort of students around dual enrollment and all of that. They don't fall in this initial group.
No, they don't. The dual enrollment that we've written in complies with the College Career Standards expectations that we're creating for this special population of students. I will add, though, that there are prerequisite criteria that these kids have to meet. And so, given that criteria, if out of a population of 250 students, we only have 5 that qualify for a dual enrollment course, and that gives us 20 additional seats, I would then seek the pleasure of the board to allow kids from other high school campuses to come in and sit in those seats, because we're not being charged by the universities that are providing dual enrollment courses on campus.
So you're referring to HB 11?
That would,
84?
yes.
That required the dual enrollment piece? Is that what you're referring to?
Not specifically.
Oh,
This is
okay.
offering dual enrollment as an option for this
Gotcha.
group of
Okay.
children.
Okay.
So this is not to comply with that ruling. This is above and
Oh,
beyond.
Okay.
And along that line, you would typically, within the pool, the three-pronged approach that we just described, you find that there are students that have great potential. However, for some reason, have fallen behind because of not being able to be engaged or challenged. And after a period of time, they're back on track, and they can benefit from dual enrollment. And so, students within this pool is really what we were talking about initially. So got you.
And Ms. Goshen just sent me a text to remind me that we have the apprenticeship program that runs in almost all classrooms at NTC in the evenings. So even if the class may not be used during the school day, all of the classrooms are completely full during the evening because of the apprenticeship programs.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I love Ms. Goshen.
I'll just wait until Ms. Goshen.
All right, any other questions on Over Camp?
I will just say, thank you very much for pursuing the additional outside funding, because I think that's going to be key. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Simmons. We're ready to move to CTE.
And the good news with the CTE high school budget is that Rex had also included those numbers in his budget. So these numbers have already been shared with you. All we did was take the initial information provided by RRMM last year and chunk it into a series of years. So this dollar figure was included with Mr. Gay's calculations presented earlier.
All right.
Okay, one quick question. I see he has CTE at 85 on this document. It looks like it's 79 there.
We were trying to round down, and I think he tried to round up.
Because
The initial estimate came in right around 80. But we also know that that was based on dollars for today.
right.
So he was taking into account future projections.
The feasibility study that we received on
It's back in the fall.
had $79 million as the price tag. So.
Yes.
I think that I wanted to talk about two different topics with CTE. The first topic was, now that we've identified a site, like Taylor, we've identified the fact that we want new construction. We've identified the fact that we have programs that we would want to put into that building, and we have a cost estimate. At this point in time, what we need to figure out is a funding source. And I wanted us as a board to discuss what our next steps are gonna be as far as funding sources for the CTE high school. Because it's pointless for us to continue the discussion about it if we're not gonna talk about funding. And we need to have that conversation with the city and say, this is what we've done so far. If you truly want CTE here in Norfolk, this is the cost that it is going to have. And then, as a separate piece, the governor's STEM school, science, math, technology, engineering, innovation, and entrepreneurship, was another topic that we had gotten a presentation on in September of 2012. And that concept, I believe we have some grant money that's available to us. And there's a person that might be able to do the study. You know, what are the barriers for us in combining, moving forward with the governor's STEM school along with the CTE high school within the same building? And I know Warren has explained this to me, that to get the charter for the STEM school from the state is a very long and difficult process, but I think that we, as a district, should take the opportunity to do both of them at the same time, because both are going to build upon each other.
So, well, go ahead.
The feasibility study for the governor's school, that contract is being it should have already been finalized, but we've been out for the last couple of days because of the snow. So that particular feasibility study should launch next week at the very latest. And then we will have very definitive information in regard to doing exactly that. How do those merge? What is the feasibility of that taking place here within Norfolk?
Okay.
So we are using that planning grant that the State Department gave us for that.
Go ahead.
I echo what Dr. Gabriel said, and thanks for bringing us up to speed as to where we are with that, because I do know we have the grant funding. I also think we should be creative about thinking about business consortium. And are there, again, businesses in our community that would support the CTE in combo with the governor's school and or not, even just the CTE? I do think we need to think about, again, Fortune 500s in our company and other industries that I think would support in order for us to develop a great workforce.
There has been a community component behind the CTE high school for the last couple of years, and there is exactly that ready to go. They're just waiting for the school system and the city to come together to say that this is a project that will happen in the immediate future. People are ready to pledge dollars and pledge support and pledge equipment to do that very thing for the CTE high school. They're just, there's a little bit of hesitancy at this moment to pledge real dollars based on a piece of paper and not of what they're considering to be not a firm commitment.
So, to Noel's earlier point, and of course, the idea of combining these two schools has come up a number of times. I think that the gentleman that we are contracting with, who led the planning for the Thomas Jefferson School in Northern Virginia, I think we would need to share with him the desire to include in the feasibility study the possibility of combining the two. A lot of work has gone into the CTE piece, not as much into the magnet school, the governor's
Right.
school, which would be a regional school. And so I think that as a part of the contract with, I believe his name is Dr. Dawkins, would be to ask him to make that a part of the consideration.
I would say it is the consideration.
Well, I mean, I don't think.
Sharing staff, you would share staff, you would share the building.
But I think we're putting the cart before the horse if we say it is, you know, because there are two different concepts. And so I think we should maintain an open mind
But I think if we say it is, then we've already made the decision before the feasibility study. And the purpose of a feasibility study is a collection of facts surrounding what all it would take, require, and entail to do that. In terms of commitment of other districts to construction costs of the building, sharing of resources for programs, capacity, seats for the participating districts. So those are all factors that I think we would want to, have the individual do the feasibility study, bring those facts back to us so that we can determine as a district is whether or not that's a win for us. So I'm not, against it or closed-minded, but I'm saying you don't make it a fact and then get a feasibility study. You get a feasibility study, then you come back and consider the factors that study.
But why, will we have him do a feasibility study on a different location, a different building? I mean, the CTE is gonna be a new construction. Why
Right.
couldn't he work within the fact that this is going to be a new building and build it within?
Warren, are you trying to call?
No, because I'm saying make that a part of the study, but you're assuming that the other districts would be interested in, are you talking sharing both the CT and the governor's STEM school, or just them sharing the same building? What?
Just being housed in the same building. CTE would be Norfolk,
Right.
Governor STEM would be regional.
And we also need to remember that you're looking at two different populations of students.
Right.
So there's a
Right.
lot of compatibility, and students who would attend the regional governor's school would only be those students who have been identified as gifted.
Right.
Correct.
So it's two different audiences, and looking at the readiness for the region in terms of acceptance of that gifted model, that is a strong component of what will be embedded within the feasibility study.
So I think, I think a part of what we want to do is, what are our objectives as a school district? What in terms of our vision, our strategic plan for both of those schools. Now, take those facts as because he would be conferring with regional superintendents as well in other districts to consider sharing in that with us. And so we would need to look at what are our goals and objectives as a district, and then as he meets with others, he can determine then, as he shares with other superintendents, okay, are there other districts on the south side interested in being a part of that model? Does that make sense?
I just want it to be very clear, explicitly clear
Sure.
for him what our goals and objectives
Yes.
and our outcomes are going to be,
Right.
in addition to a timeline.
Okay.
Just a question, what is the bearing and relevance of the CT high school to the gap that we have and the budget that we need to prepare in the coming weeks? I mean, can you just understand the concept and big picture and the John Richter and the school combining and all that? But specific to what we've been dealing with for the previous 4 hours, can you explain to me what it is we need to be considering for the CT high school as it relates to the budget that we're going to submit or present in the coming weeks?
Short term, nothing. Because the project is probably so far off that it won't have any implications on our budget planning for next year and perhaps even FY16. What we will have to begin, once the project gets off the ground, is we'll have to begin to factor in what are going to be the ongoing operating costs, what are going to be the unique staffing costs, and we would have to probably have that plan the moment we decide to go forward. We would have to have that 5-year look at what it would cost to outfit and run this unique facility, staffing, technology, and any other operating costs.
And I'm thinking
For short term, none, that I'm aware of.
or maybe at least minimally some planning money, because planning would need to be continued. I mean, I know that Ms. Goshen does a good deal of that as it relates to the academies and the career paths or what have you. But I'm thinking there could be a possibility minimally of additional planning money to continue.
And that might lend itself to a one-time funding source.
Right.
So if we're gonna get state money, seed money to do these kind of things, part of that seed money could help there too.
So I would just in the context of year one, year two of the strategic plan and all the other things that we need to get to,
Right.
unless there is something specifically compelling
Right.
that we need to deal with as relates to this budget at this time, can we continue to work on it as part of the 5-year strategic plan that we're talking about, but not necessarily let it consume too much attention and time for this discussion unless there's something compelling that we need to deal with that's either going to add to the gap or close the gap?
Agreed. All I would ask is, are we planning on sharing any of this information on February the 4th with council? Do they know that at this point in time, we are at a standstill with CTE because we haven't been funded?
Well, yes. I mean, they're certainly aware of the fact that CTE is a part of our plans, but the cost, we've shared more than one occasion, but the feasibility study has indicated to us in terms of the place, the location, and what that cost would be.
Okay, and are they up to speed with our embracing the fact of a potential for a governor's school?
Yes. But in terms of next steps, as we were talking about hiring this particular gentleman, no.
Okay.
Okay? All right? Early learning, and then after early learning, are we going to include the staffing piece, that report that was submitted?
From Dr. Birdsong?
Yes.
Dr. Birdsong gave me her information
Okay.
to share with the board.
All right, so early learning, and then the staffing piece, and then we'll summarize.
Okay, and we took the board's directive in terms of expanding our early learning enrollment throughout the next 5 years and have plotted that out over the course of 5 years. But I do want to draw your attention to the first goal listed for 14-15, and that says maintain our current NPS enrollment. And I'll let Dr. Thornton explain to you why that is important, for that to be listed as our first goal for maintaining our current enrollment.
So Digna, I missed what you were asking me to do?
To explain why we have the first goal as our current enrollment.
Okay. One of the, when we look at the now former Governor McDonald's budget proposal for the next biennium, we are, based on his proposal, we would see a reduction of approximately $1 million in state support for our current at-risk 4-year-old Virginia preschool initiative. So right now, in the current year, we receive about $7.2 million. Next year, we're slated to receive only $6.1 million. So when I inquired with the budget office at DOE and say, well, why are we seeing such a dramatic change or reduction? They have changed their funding formula to determine how much each school division is entitled to. And the major change is that they're no longer, previously they were using data from the Virginia Employment Commission. I don't know why, but they were using data from the Virginia Employment Commission to estimate the number of eligible 4-year-olds in a particular community. They've changed that data source from VEC to doing it internally within DOE. And what they're using now, as they explained it to me, was that they're using our recent and projected kindergarten enrollment trends to estimate or project how many 4-year-olds are in the community. And for us, that created a dramatic decrease in the number of kids to be plugged into the formula, which results in $1 million decline in state funding for next year. You know, our decline is pretty acute when you compare it to the impact that the change has had on the other 130 or so school divisions. So I asked Contact up there, the director of budget, to look into it and say, hey, are they aware that this is having this significant impact on us? So they're looking into it. But, you know, we're only one of maybe 3 that had a significant decline, so I don't know how much movement that's going to take. Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, thank you.
So we're getting $1 million, right now, we're programmed to get $1 million less from the state for our existing program.
Mhm.
And that translates to roughly 250 students.
Of our current
And
students.
that's
Of
just
our
for-
current
That's just for
students.
pre-K 4, or is that for pre-K 4 and 3?
That's just
4.
pre-K 4.
Yeah, the state doesn't provide any funding for 3 that I'm aware of.
How many students did you say?
Roughly 250 students.
But the 14 million reflects that reduction in funding. With- Assuming that we wouldn't reduce the number of kids that we're servicing at this point.
Okay. And then the waiting list, we've already determined that was, 'cause I know, they'll know.
They're down at the bottom. It's,
I'm
it's
looking.
by the classroom, and it would be roughly
Yeah.
$4.2 million, but that does not include the cost of pre-K potties and water fountains. That's simply furniture and staffing and materials and supplies. And until the space has been located, Mr. Gay's good, but he can't give us a figure on how much it would cost to retrofit a classroom to make it pre-K ready without knowing what the actual space is going to be.
So in addition, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joanne.
Do we have the space right now to house the two?
We have classrooms, a spare classroom here, a spare classroom there, but it would require taking classrooms that are currently established for upper elementary and converting those into early elementary classrooms with water and bathrooms. So we're still working collaboratively with the community and have some very positive leads at this point in regard to using some collaborative space or some space from other agencies who lost some funding that have classrooms available, but none of that has been finalized yet, so it's still in the conversation stage.
Okay.
So,
All right. Any other questions about early learning?
So what are we supposed to do with this information we receive?
Well,
Just is what it is?
Well, I think that after we receive this next piece, our next step is going to be in looking at again what's essential from all that we've received for fiscal year 15, number one. Some of these items is already included in the $14 million gap. We already know that. What is not included in that gap, that's essential for fiscal year 15 among the forces we've received. You all follow me so far? Okay, and so at the end of this discussion, one or two things, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. We can say to the administration, please bring us back essentials, as we looked at $8 million for the next 5 years for technology, so on and so forth. Bring us back the essentials for the next 2 to 3 years, and what do those numbers look like? Or our only other approach would simply be to say, I mean, it's hard to prioritize without having the cost. I mean, the essential cost. Because what we wanted to walk away with today was a determination on what's most important for us to fulfill the strategic plan over the next 4 years. We're already in year 1. It's more than a notion.
I still have a question on pre-K though. I don't know if Rodney, you were getting at this, but okay, so it's 162 per classroom. How many classrooms are we talking about, and how much is that in the next fiscal year that we would need to put on the table to maintain current and eliminate the waiting list? Is that the 4.3 that we keep
No,
talking
it would be
about?
5.2 million. Because to eliminate our waiting list would be 4.2 million for staffing and supplies. That does not include facilities retrofit costs.
Right.
So it would be a total of 5.2. We went ahead and included the 1 million in that budget deficit because our number one goal is to maintain our current enrollment. And we have not included the waiting list cost in there as of yet because we were not sure that in light of the fact that we had to add $1 million to that to maintain what we had, that the expansion of early learning for next year
I'm confused now. That sounds
Yeah.
like $2 additional million.
Yeah.
The 1 million that we're losing from the state.
We
is
need
in
that
the
to
gap.
keep
But
what
then
we
there's another
have.
million that goes with the 4.2 for facilities and whatnot to be able to take care of the waiting list.
Well, the cost of the facilities is speculative because
Right.
we don't know where those are gonna be. So that number we can't give you. All we can give you today is the 4.2, and that covers staffing, supplies, materials. It does not include the cost of any things that Mr. Gay and his staff would need to do to retrofit spaces.
But the 1 million that's already the $14 million gap.
That is only to maintain
Maintain.
the current
That's the revenue
enrollment.
loss.
That's the revenue, exactly.
Yes.
Without cutting the current program.
Right, so the point I'm making then is that the 4.2 alone does not take care of the kids on the waiting list, as has been said a number of times.
So 4.2 plus.
Right,
Yes.
right.
But
Plus
what
if
is the plus? Do we
We
know?
don't
We
know.
don't know because we don't have all those spaces identified.
If we were to add the waiting list, the operating cost would be 4.2 million, which would grow the gap from 14 to 18 million.
And we're saying that the waiting list right now is 230 students
Right.
who are qualifiers,
Exactly.
not even the non-qualifiers.
Exactly.
Restricted students.
Right.
And that was based on the waiting list that we had when that figure was generated, not anyone who's been added to the
Right,
list
that was
since.
pre-K roundup, right?
It was back in the fall. I think that was an October figure.
Right.
And there have been children who have been added to the list since.
I would encourage us to take this opportunity to think a little bit outside of the box with this. Because while there is, I think, number one, we need to get a figure as to how many 4-year-olds we have in the city, an accurate figure. So I don't know if that's from John Richter, I don't know where we can get, if that's something that the city can provide us. I think we need to know. And then at that point in time, I think we need to get a figure.
Tanya has that number.
Oh.
Yes, I got that number from NRHA.
Okay.
For that population of students, which represents 70% of the population of the city.
Do you have that number down? Or you can-
What is-
For the 3-year-olds or the 4-year-olds?
public housing?
No, 70% of our, that's accommodate, doesn't it represent about 70% of our population? No,
I'm
well,
asking
not
you, you
all of
said
them, no, no.
Public housing.
I couldn't clarity what you
The
said.
kids, it's 70% of the
That's right.
kids,
I
I'm
don't think
thinking, no,
that's-
that's not what
Well,
I'm saying.
according to the figure we got from, or Latanya got from NHRA, we had around 400-ish, but that was specific to 3-year-olds.
3 and 4-year-olds.
It wasn't broken out by 3 and 4. It was a
Okay.
plump figure, but that was only for children who are associated with the housing units.
Okay.
We don't know citywide.
So I think what we need to do is we need to look citywide, okay? Because there's a great percentage of parents who have children, who are sending their children to other facilities. Now, I think that we should think about and perhaps even take action on establishing maybe 5 or 6 classrooms for non-Title I categorical students, so that we can try to bring in some of those middle-class families into our school system and consider charging them tuition for full-day 4-year-old pre-K. And start small and then grow your program. If we have the space for it, I think we should look at that idea, because part of our priorities is to attract and retain middle-class families. That population is a great low-hanging piece of fruit to get and to keep within our system. And I don't think that they're gonna have a problem with paying tuition, because they're probably already paying tuition. The catch is that we have to make the program a competitive and worthwhile program for them to attend. And I think that if we don't start looking at some innovative concepts such as that, we're just gonna continue to not expand our student population pool, and we're going to lose students. So I think we need to consider that. And I kind of did the numbers already, So, if we just did 5 classes, that would give us 90 slots for just 4-year-olds, and it would be roughly $800,000. And if you charged just $6,000 for the year, that's $540,000. That leaves NPS with a bill of $300,000.
You charge $6,000 a year.
Now, I'm saying 6,000. If you just charge 6,000 for the year,
$500 a month, what you're saying?
or 3,000 a semester, fall. I'm just
Right.
for the year.
I'm just trying to understand, yeah.
Right. 6,000 for the school year from, let's say, September to June. Okay,
Right.
just 6,000. That gives us more
Okay.
than half of what per child for the cost. So, and what we would need to figure out is, the rooms, how much it costs to. We know what the costs are for the teacher, for the paraprofessional, for outfitting the classroom. We don't have the facilities costs yet, but if we just say 5, just start with something. I think that's something that this district desperately needs to consider. And if you even want to raise it to more than 6,000, I'm sure that if you polled some of the Williams School, Norfolk Collegiate, Norfolk Academy, all the other ones, it's more than that. And it's some of the programs are half day. So I really think that we need to move in that direction. I'm very open to any other suggestions or comments on that.
Along that line, I would be interested, and maybe we have the info already, and I haven't seen it yet, but I would be interested in what the current cost per family is at this point, so that when we begin to plan that, we take that into consideration, because I think that'd be a smart thing to do. And I don't know what that figure is monthly right now.
It depends on the facility, and they vary
So-
from low end to high end.
Yeah, that's what-
Yeah, we've got it, we've
Yeah,
got it.
so-
Okay. Any other questions, comments on early learning?
I have one comment. I'm on the Mayor's Commission for the reduction of poverty in the city, and there has been tremendous discussion around perhaps using NRHA facilities because they have on-site rec centers that could house that population of students, and it would minimize costs too because the building is there. So we are thinking out of the box and plan to talk to teaching and learning about that.
If they cooperate, because we had.
Because they charged us in
They
years
charged us, we had
past.
pre-K classes over at,
Cabot Farm.
Calvert.
Square.
And that's one of the reasons why we don't have them there now.
I've been talking with the people that are way up, and they are saying no charge.
Okay.
So,
All right.
let's hammer it.
Look forward in writing.
Yeah.
There you go.
I just like to say I like Dr. Gabriel's ideas. I don't know how you make it work, but if it's somehow, again, to pilot something like that and begin to attract families, especially, at some locations that we would meet some of the other goals that we've talked about. Might be worth taking a look at it.
So I think it would be good to kind of frame that in writing for us to look at it and see if we want to insert that as part of our plan for going forward. So as we get ready to transition to the staffing salaries, here's what I see, and it's very simple and it's very similar to what Warren has submitted to us, is that we create a similar layout of fiscal year 15, 16, 17 needs itemized in the column for these various areas, total at the bottom. Now, again, I think some of this could be further vetted for essentials, and I don't know how much of this is, what's the high-end car now? I'm talking about the real high-end cars now, that, APOC or something like that, what is that, APOC? I don't know, some of you, oh, y'all know even?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Or maybe it's the young people. So I don't know if this, I often use the term when I get proposals from my staff on cost of things. Is this the Mercedes or the Taurus? And I know, we want, the high end, but You drive a Taurus. Sponsored. There's a discussion in Charlottesville about this. Automobile, like, what do we have?
We had a Dodge Caravan.
And so really, I think our
With a
numbers.
good transmission.
So I think as we lay this out, though, really, we need to make sure that it's, you know, the essentials. I mean, not the bare bones, but certainly the essentials, so that we are as realistic as possible. I know realistic is a relative term, but I think that's the next step after we finish tonight, is being able to lay that out so that we can communicate clearly to the community those needs. Now, I think it's an ongoing responsibility of ours to prioritize these things. And I know it's easy to put them all on the same road. You know, facilities, they gotta be, you know, repaired and warm and no water coming in. We need the one-to-one computers. We need the infrastructure in the buildings for up-to-date technology. So it would be easy to kind of try to put all these on the same plane, but we can't. We have to prioritize as we do in our own personal budget. Now, I'm not an expert in that, I'm not, but I think conceptually, we have to get there. So, comments or questions on that, and then we'll move on to salaries. If you think I'm crazy, please say it now.
I think that's what Rex was trying to explain to the board about the way he laid his out.
Right.
That, I think he was saying that if there was an unlimited amount of money, all of these things are pent-up needs as it relates to facility. But then the reality is, how do we space it out?
Right.
And that's what you want us to do with this.
Yes.
And it allows us to be transparent of the needs
Mhm.
as well as the alignment to the strategic plan. So that we're not saying, we're not telling you just because we know we can't afford it today.
Okay, so now staffing, salaries, our last area.
All right, Dr. Birdsong asked me to share with the board, or at least review with the board, the document that she provided you all maybe a couple of weeks ago now, based on some questions, requests for information that Dr. Stewart had asked her for at a school board meeting. If all of you have the document, are there any questions? What she provided was, through my office, the estimated cost of a 1% salary increase for teachers only, the estimated cost for a 1% for all employees, the estimated cost to add one additional day to the current teacher's salary contract, and then what would it cost to have Norfolk Public Schools starting salary for teachers the highest in the region, or at least matching the existing highest in the region.
And it's January 17th email.
It's-
Yeah,
okay.
can't log in right now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is that on our NPS account?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see.
Do you want me to go through the numbers, or they're quick numbers?
Sure, sure.
The cost of 1% for teachers, only teachers, or those instructional staff, would be 1.7 million. That includes salaries and benefits. So you would incrementally add to or multiply by however many percent increase you would want. So 1.7 for 1%, 3.4, and so on. The cost for a 1% for all staff, including teachers, classified, and admin, would be a total of 2.3 million, and then times 2 would be 4.6. And then the question of what would it cost to add one additional contract day to all teachers, or 10-month teachers, that estimated cost would be approximately $800,000.
Say that again.
The cost of adding one additional contract day for teachers, for 10-month teachers,
Right.
would cost approximately $800,000. Essentially, it's a 0.5%, because they're 200-day teacher contract. If you add a day, then you're essentially adding a 0.5%. So you go to 201, and you do the math, that's how we get 800,000.
Right. Warren, are you there? Warren? I guess that's a no. Okay, and I was asking if he was there because he requested this additional day, scenario, and I was trying to remember what his, line of thinking was.
Is Dr. Birdsong still on the line?
Dr. Birdsong, are you there? Did I turn,
Are there gonna be any?
is anybody here?
Are there gonna be any additional healthcare costs that the teachers are going to have to encumber
Time
this year
expired.
coming
Put some more
up?
money in the meter.
At this point in time, we don't know what, we're working with the city because now we have a merged self-insurance program. So we don't know at this point what if any health insurance cost increase we'll have. We're still working on that and whatever the planning assumption is gonna be. So probably by the time we present Dr. King's budget, we'll have a better idea.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm still here.
Okay. And then how about?
I'm a little delayed. I'm
retirement
a minute
costs?
behind you.
Not for employees, but retirement costs are going up, but we, by law, are required to absorb those. You can't pass any of those additional costs
Do we
on.
know what those numbers are yet?
Yeah, it's,
Hello,
the,
I am here. Can anyone hear me?
Hey, Warren.
If you could let Dr. Thornton answer this one, because this is something we heard in Richmond, but it's our cost to bear.
the question that Dr. Gabriel asked was, are VRS or retirement costs going up for employees, was your first question. My response is no. We cannot by law pass on any additional VRS costs to our existing employees because we've already passed on the full 5%.
Right.
Then her second question was, well, are the costs for the school division going up for VRS? The answer is yes. I think I shared with the board at a previous meeting that the rates are going up by about 3 points.
Yes.
And for us, that equates to about a net of a $5 million increase for next year,
And that's in that 14.
which is included in the 14.
Okay.
Now, if we were to add compensation to it, then of course VRS costs would go up even more.
So right now in the 14, we have $1 million for the pre-K, to maintain the pre-K. We've got $5 million for VRS.
And
We
also the
have,
carryover money from last year.
oh.
This
okay.
is a synopsis of how we got to the 14 million, but yes.
Okay, okay. I'll just write this down.
You don't have that put on the screen?
Open campus.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk to this? or
No, no.
That gets us?
No. And I don't need to, I mean,
Where is the pre-K on here?
That's not on there. We're waiting for some direction from the board. As I said earlier, if we were to add these other items that we talked about today, pre-K, professional development, technology, then we're looking at an additional $11 million. But
Conservatively.
conservative, right.
say that again?
Dr. Gabriel was asking, she was noting that the early learning wasn't part of this.
You're not talking about that $4 million.
Right, she is.
No, I'm
No,
not,
no,
I'm just
You're
talking about the $1 million to
the $1
maintain.
million.
Yeah, that is reflected here because
Right.
the revenue was reduced. Up top, it's a reduction in state revenue. So, and that's reflected in the $306 million total revenue
That would have been
picture.
307.
Right,
Oh, okay.
and we did,
Oh, all right.
right, yeah.
And this also does not include, obviously, what we're discussing here, which is Dr. Birdsong's.
Correct,
Oh, yeah.
correct.
Okay. Warren?
Yes. The recognition that I'm heard.
No, the question I had was, you had requested information on what?
Again, it's hard to understand. You're speaking to me because it's hard to hear what you're saying. Could you,
Oh.
Mike?
Okay, can you hear me better?
Yeah, I would hope that I would have a minute. I think I probably missed the whole conversation, and I'm feeling very much like the little boy who says the emperor has no clothes and nobody's listening. So, but I am in Baltimore, and I do have just a few things I'd like to say before we unconvene. But it sounds like you've had a productive day, and everyone was having fun. I apologize for intruding.
Well, no intrusion, and we have purchased an outfit for the emperor. So you requested information on the getting a cost on one additional day for instructional
Yeah,
staff?
I'd rather speak in general to the item that was passed out. Was there an item that Courtney passed out that I had created?
You don't want to ask the
Yes,
question.
being helpful with our prioritization and with the next week's meeting.
Okay, go right ahead. We're listening.
Go right, let's go right ahead. So, okay. Again, I feel a lot like the little boy who says the empress has no clothes and nobody's listening. So that you just need to know that's how I'm feeling right now. But I apologize. I have created the problem by being where I am, and it's not hot where I am right now. So, was the item distributed?
Yes, we have it in front of us. Courtney followed your order.
Well, I have several comments related to it, and then I'll shut up and take another flight. But most important to me is that everything that I do as a school board member is done in order to help students learn. That's important. So therefore, the most important people involved in that, in my opinion, are those teachers. I believe Dr. King is the lead teacher. I believe principals are teachers. The staff are teachers. Importantly, our classroom teachers are critical. There are some assumptions and given tos that are not listed on that sheet. First, our explicit school board priorities. Second, former school board commitments, which seems to just be done and be forgotten. Annual operating and CIP encumbrances. And to Dr. Thornton, the first time he mentioned it, the second time he mentioned it, I heard him loud and clear. The state is shifting more costs. They're beginning additional unfunded mandates, and the revenues that we had from last year, there are some that we cannot expect again this year. I heard that big time. Therefore, I understand, with much of the money being encumbered for personnel costs, and what Dr. Thornton has said, that there's not a lot of money that we can expect to prioritize for this year's budget request. I also know that our strategic plan has been created, but what's missing in the strategic plan, for me, is the ultimate destinations. The Norfolk Public Schools reimagined, pardon that. Yet unclear was the demographic study. I had hoped that would be done by Thanksgiving. And Rex's report and Andrea's report, what I need is that all of us, our leadership team members, see the same destination, the same end results 5 years down the road, so that we can all understand and support it. What's missing for me are the views that obviously y'all have been discussing all day, and I apologize for not being there. But for the next 14-15 budget priorities, in the context of a 5-year plan, I hope I have some time when I'm with you next to talk about two biggies, what I'm calling the bookends. First, if anyone heard the State of the Union speech by the President just last night, he spoke very clearly about bookends that I think we have been talking about in Norfolk. Number one, pre-K4. The President spoke about pre-K4, and the President spoke about our CTE concept. What is missing from the sheet that I gave you are very important items, but I just didn't put them all on there. I think I need help from our entire leadership team. The Transformation Initiative, I still think that's important. Professional development, I've heard Dr. King. Finally, the stars are aligning on one thing, pre-K4. The President speaks about it. The governor, new governor spoke about it. The new lieutenant governor spoke about it. All in favor. The new Secretary of Education spoke about it. And the dean, if Dr. Simmons is there, she knows the dean of Old Dominion University has told me and us that she has a very strong interest in it, and we have a center. Dr. Gabriel well knows we have a early childhood center. So each of those items that are listed, and any of the other items that would be listed, and any revenues that does exist, assuming that it's a tight year and the state has shifted more costs and we have revenues that are not going to be ours again this year, what's important is that each of my operating and CIP items need a flow chart to go with it. So what I've given you is a chart that I used 40 years ago in the military, 30 years ago in banking and business, and for 25 years in leadership roles in education. It's a simple chart. It's incomplete because it doesn't have on it that which you want, you need, and we all see together. But it is missing all of that. But for me, I need us all to see the same destination. Now for a little meanness. City Council has been saying many things. And we've been saying many things for several years. For about 8 years, I've been paying attention. 3 years on the school board. There were commitments made, and we need to begin looking at a 5-year span and say, from now on, when are these things going to happen? And even though there may not be enough money to commit to a pre-K initiative, to the open campus initiative, to a teacher increment this year, to CTE, even though there may not be a great deal of money, somehow we need to put an X on a date and say this is when it will begin. Now, all of this, I know, is done out of context, and you probably have already settled all this, and so this rant is useless or not necessary. But again, I've been feeling very much like, for a long time, like the boy who's saying the emperor has no clothes, and for about 20 minutes I was hanging on the line. I didn't know that anybody knew I was there. I'm grateful that you let me speak. Now I'll pause. If there's anyone who wants to ask anything or throw anything at the telephone, please let me know what you're throwing. But just pause, and then I'll say thank you for listening.
Thank you, Warren. And you really pretty much said what we've said this afternoon. I don't think there is any disagreement or any difference in what you've just shared and what we've talked about for the last couple of hours. I mean, at the end of this conversation.
Now, so wherever the microphone is in position for your speaking, it's easy to hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. So at the end of this conversation, the next step is to lay out these 5-year needs, and very similarly to the way you have proposed and what you've left with us through the coordinate. So thank you.
Dr. Houston and all, what's critical to me is the city council and the school board needs to know when we're starting each of those facilities. We need to deal with, there's an item listed on there, the Marty issue. We need to deal with everything. And even though Dr. Thornton knows there isn't a lot of money, he told us, he saw what was coming, we still can begin the most important things. And what I listed there was my opinion. Whatever whatever we, the whole group, ends up listening, I will support. But we've got to begin to say we're going to do it now. And the city council needs to say the same thing. Not just talking about what we're going to do, but saying, yes, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it at this time. So thanks again. I think your invitation was for me to shut up and hang up. So anything else anyone wants to ask or say before I do that?
No, you don't have to hang up unless you have to go.
Did you want one more question regarding Dr. Birdsong's thing? No, you're good. Okay.
Can't hear. I heard a wonderful, educated female voice. It's either we have several choices there. So I'm not sure.
Good save.
Don't go down that path. Yeah, don't do there.
Oh, it's all of you, right?
Yeah.
Somebody said something, but I didn't hear what it was.
Okay. So thank you, Warren. And you please don't hang up unless you absolutely have to. Okay. So any other comments?
Hanging up, and thank you so much. I'll be in town later on. Look forward to seeing y'all soon.
Have a safe journey.
Tell him to come here.
Yeah.
Might be here. I have a question on related to human resources. And Dr. Birdsong, are you still there? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I didn't, not necessarily in the report that we have here related to Dr. Stewart's question, but,
Dr. King, I can't hear you, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
That's
That's Mr. Jordan.
Just yell.
So,
Can we bring the phone over closer to him?
Yes.
anyway, I just want to talk about the recommendations that you have brought to us before around trying to provide salary boosts and incentives for staff at hard-to-staff schools. So I just want to know if that recommendation that you have brought to us several times over the past year, if that's been factored into any of the budget documents that we're looking at thus far. Hmm?
The shortfall?
Yeah, the shortfall or anything else? No. So we have, going back to what Dr. Stewart said, we talked about quite a bit about our hard-to-staff schools. And I know we have to have competitive salaries across the board, but we also know we have, within that framework, the challenge around our hard-to-staff schools. I would like to see that brought forward in some way for us to look at as a proposal, and as Dr. Stewart said, not have it just continue to drag out. Either we're going to act on it and then quantify what that is and prioritize it, or not. But I know if Dr. Birdsong had anything that she wanted to share, I know she's given it to us times before. We don't have it in front of us now, but can you at least speak to the research that you've done around sustainability at our hard-to-staff schools and trying to attract highly effective teachers and principals at our hard-to-staff schools?
Yes, we have talked about meetings, and what we have decided, because we looked at those year 2 plans, Mr. Jordan, and we have some concerns about implementing all of those plans as it relates to providing incentives for all teachers in hard-to-staff buildings, because we've talked about it quite a bit. And although we know that our teachers are working very hard, philosophically, we're not sure if, it would be prudent to provide incentives for teachers that have already been there for quite some time. Just because you're in a particular building doesn't necessarily mean that you should rate a stipend. So one of the ideas that we discussed was looking at being able to secure funding from the school improvement grant that Natalie Halloran is working with us to put that in the application to do so. We're looking at a pilot for 4 of our schools, and what we are considering doing is that we're looking at internally the teachers that have a proven track record for student academic achievement, and if these teachers would like to transfer voluntarily to the 4 schools that we are considering at this time. And if they do so, we're looking at providing a $5,000 stipend to these teachers. That would include at the elementary level, grades 3, 4, and 5, because they are the tested areas. And we're looking at English and mathematics at the secondary level, because at this time, those are our areas of need. There's similar models, in other districts, particularly Mr. Coleman made reference to the one being utilized in Kent County, North Carolina, and so we're excited about being able to move forward with that.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And of course, that was one of the items presented to us by the superintendent in terms of programs, activities, or initiatives that should be funded. One page that we received a couple of months or a month or so ago. You know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Okay, so here's where we are. I think we need to see this laid out on a 1-pager, year by year, in each of the categories, the totals. That's number 1. Number 2, I think it's important that we, as soon as possible, today would have been ideal, communicate to the superintendent what we would like to see in the proposed budget, such as if incentive for teachers for hard to staff schools, if that's something we really want to see reflected in the fiscal year proposed budget, we would need to communicate that to him while he's in the process of finalizing that to present to us on February 19th, or other associated items. Yes.
We haven't heard from Sam or his administration if there are any areas that he thinks we could cut or trim,
Right,
so we should probably hear that as well.
I agree. So every work session from now till the end of March must include budget discussion, everyone. February 19th is when we get the proposed budget, so that means that Wednesday, 5th, that has to be budget discussion as a part of that, and that's when, if that's soon enough, I mean, today is Thursday, would you have some of those numbers and items at that, by Wednesday?
In the one-page layout?
Yeah,
Or-
exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about even some cost-cutting possibilities.
You said by Wednesday.
Yeah. I know.
Because
Meet next Wednesday.
after that is the proposed budget.
We've got some placeholders that we're looking at to cut, like in non-school-based operating, $1 million, looking at cutting in some other areas, yes. We've got some things identified.
Well, don't forget the programs that I mentioned earlier. You know, let's look at everything on the table, honestly. It's called economic pruning, and we just have to be very disciplined.
Yeah, and it isn't easy, especially after, 4 consecutive years of major cuts. It becomes increasingly more difficult, but we have to do it.
Yeah, if we're not using things, then we shouldn't pay for them.
Absolutely. Or if they're not working for us.
Exactly.
Okay, so next step is getting the one-page, the layout with this information that we've received by category, by year, okay? I think that,
And the layout is gonna include the safety nets, the professional development, the maintenance and facilities, including in that with new construction and CTE, technology needs, pre-K, and teachers' salaries.
right, and like some of those, such as pre-K, would definitely need explanations associated with it, so that the scenarios are there of funding the current waiting list with the notation that doesn't include facilities, just instructors, correct?
And materials and supplies and furniture.
Okay, so those notes should be a part of that document so that it could be clearly understood.
And I recommend that under facilities that we don't double count the schools that are already going to be paid for outside of this.
Right, now, that needs to be communicated to Rex, and I agree. So we would take out of that the 5 schools and Maury, the replacement,
No, we keep more, we keep CTE, but we take out the 5 over 5 years.
Gotcha,
Right.
gotcha, I'm with you. Okay. Okay,
So I'm sorry, I had interrupted you when I had asked about the timeline. You said our next steps are this, and then.
right, and I'm trying to think now, if we get some of the possible items for cost-saving measures, we'll get that on Wednesday.
And the extra list the extra list outside of the bottom, the base budget, remember the list of additional items?
They did above and beyond the 11?
Yeah, right, above and beyond the 14 and 14.
But that's what the one page
Right.
with notes
That will delineate that.
would
Yes.
reflect.
Yes. Okay, yes.
Just for clarification, so we have, everything we talked about today is on this list.
Mhm.
And I guess, is there anything that we talked about today that's not on this list? Because it would seem to me that the items, outside of the CIP-related items, but at least in terms of a programmatic piece,
Mhm.
protect pupil-teacher ratios, is that already embedded in your,
14?
in your gap?
14 would leave it right where it is
What it
today.
is.
Right.
And we just talked about competitive compensation, but right now,
There's no.
it's flat. What you
Correct.
have in your 14 is flat.
Correct.
So we would look at that. You began to address the ITRT or DITS, whatever they're called, SOQ mandate.
We need to change that name, actually.
I like ITRTs
That's a good
myself.
thing.
We didn't name them. That's
Okay,
what they
the
had.
school nurses,
Yes,
That's
to
included?
continue that phasing in, yes.
that's included. Instructional technology integration, is that on the outside or on the inside?
Outside.
Okay. So
That's part of what you would see in Andrea's saying what infrastructure is needed to continue that integration.
Okay, we talked about professional development, we talked about the preschool learning, gifted education, academic rigor, we have that covered, that's
That was
included.
embedded. in there.
Baseline,
It's embedded, yeah.
Current.
It's embedded.
program level.
It's baseline, but is it the next phase up? Based upon the strategic plan,
Right.
is it included, or is it something that we need to look at another phase up?
Our goal is for next year, to maintain the expansions that we implemented this year across the board, and to have all of our gifted positions fully staffed on day one.
And that's already included.
That's included within what you received today.
Without adding to the budget, yes. Because I guess Title II would continue. Whatever
Yes.
we've done with Title II up to this point for those programs, the assumption is that Title II would cover it for another year.
Correct.
For another 1 year,
It's an annual grant, so
so we think it will continue.
continue.
Okay. Differentiated pay, we just talked about that, so that's something we're gonna come back with.
In addition to, right.
And then, open campus, we just.
That's in the 14 million.
That's in the 14.
And you had added grow demand for NPS.
Yes, that was your,
Well, you had, when we initially had this document, you asked that we add that grow demand for NPS
yeah,
to the document, and then that's where I inserted
add your
the pre-K.
pre-K piece.
And so that was new program. Expand, actually expand.
And we're still waiting on specific numbers related to the thematic costs associated with the transformation initiatives, or is that already in there?
The cost for the professional learning and the training was included in
Like
the.
that piece?
Yes,
But anything else, we're still may have some calculations going.
right, we're waiting on the final transportation numbers for
That
the
will-
bus drivers and bus costs
That we
for
still need
those
to
10
look at.
days, yes.
So the transformation impact is something that we also need to add to
But
this.
Mr. Kleinbell is making that diligent. We talked about it.
Are you talking about transformation of the campus or transformation 10?
The 10.
And the 10.
Okay. All right. Now, in terms of how we prioritize this information, I don't have that answer.
This was.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, I think we made great progress today. There are a couple of more items. Here's 15 minutes left. The school board budget is a big chunk of information to consume. Here's what I'd like to do. Here are the items that we needed to consider before we ended today. And how we squeeze it into the next 15 minutes, and they need to change the tape too, I don't know, but let me just tell you what they are. School board budget, obviously, and we're gonna consider the upcoming agenda. And I do have a framework for the agenda with council on Tuesday, and the John Richter timeline. Okay, that's information that we can simply just go ahead and hand out. Both of those items are attached to the framework for agenda for council and the John Richter timeline. Okay. And so those are the items: school board budget, February 5th agenda, and you have coming to you the John Ricker timeline and the city council agenda. Yes. Okay.
Can we comment on this?
Okay. Yes.
So looking at the city council, DeJean Richter,
Uh-huh.
are we gonna also outline the dates in the future in terms of deliverables about what we expect DeJean Richter to deliver, when, where, in terms of when we're gonna have a good board discussion, when there's gonna be community discussion, when there's gonna be the next steering committee discussion?
Yes, and that timeline is all of it, what you just mentioned is in the timeline attached.
Okay, but I just see on here chronology of events to date
Right.
versus, it's really gotta be fully.
Right.
We included the dates to the end of February.
But
Okay.
what is not on the agenda, you're right, Courtney, in terms of not reflected. Today and to come. Okay.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask if we would consider narrowing what's on this agenda. Personally, I'm uncomfortable discussing DeJean Richter with the council when we don't know where we are with DeJean Richter ourselves, and I think that it opens up a unhealthy scenario to begin to try to explain things and to answer questions that we don't know yet and is still going through the community process. So
Yeah.
I'm just my input.
Sure.
My recommendation would be that we not do that at this time, other than the fact that we are still working with DeJean Richter and perhaps where we are in the timeline, but beginning to go into discussion. We didn't even talk about capacity in these things as we just spent 4 hours today. I just think it opens up too many questions that we can't answer, and it has the potential to cause additional confusion to the public. So, my thought would be
Yeah.
to take that off.
And here are my thoughts, respectfully. One, it's not so much, I think, the what is the how. It's how it's presented. Two, this work has not been done in a vacuum. Community discussions have already taken place. This is information that I'm sure has already been discussed in the public. It gives us an opportunity to put perspective on it in terms of where we are right now. Personally, I don't think you ignore it and take it off the agenda, but I think you present it in a way that is clear. This is the big picture. Here's where we are in the process. Here's what's going to happen next.
And all, I guess.
And I respect what you're saying.
My counter to that is that I'm not saying don't discuss it with council at all.
Yeah.
I'm saying I think it is too, it is not steady enough and ready enough to discuss on February 4th. I'm not saying don't discuss it. I just don't, I think it's too much stuff here to try to have a productive conversation that can be focused and driven. Okay, so that's just my input.
Right.
As the chair, you all can set whatever you want to set. I just want to put that out there. I also would recommend, even under the student achievement and school improvement areas, narrow, focus, high level.
Right. That's what we've discussed.
Well, I just got it.
Right,
So,
I'm with you.
I'm just trying to share some thoughts.
Sure.
And so if we can kind of be focused and narrow and maybe even talk about or have some idea what our objectives are coming out of the meeting. I'd like to know what our objectives are coming out of the meeting.
Okay.
So outside of just communicating certain information.
Quinn?
I don't think that we cannot talk about DeJean Richter per se, because it's gonna come up in the course of the budget discussion. Because they're gonna say, will any of those recommendations lead to budget increases, budget decreases over time, year 1, year 5? And how will that play into your budget reconciliation? So I do think we need to speak to it. It just depends on the detail we get to. But it's gonna be an obvious question, because they're gonna say, well, are you taking into account that you might have the same number of schools, less schools, reconfiguration of schools, or not?
Right, and I don't disagree. I just, in our process, the superintendent's gonna come to us with some recommendations on the 19th. And I'm just cautioning that if, as a board, if we jump ahead of whatever it is that we're going to hear from the superintendent, then we have the potential to kind of negatively impact or potentially undo all that we just spent doing for the last 5 hours. So I'm just, again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. We know that the process calls for us to hear from the superintendent, for us to adopt the budget, for us to present it to council. We already have that scheduling process embedded. If we get ahead of ourselves on the 4th, I'm just putting forward just a word of caution that we don't put something out to the council that I know all of us are gonna go back and just try to absorb for ourselves after spending all the time that we have. That's all.
If I could just say one more thing, you know, when we hear Dr. King's budget on 19th, we're still not gonna have the final John Richter presentation by then. The final one, according to yours, we received final report February 28th. So just FYI.
Yeah, no, I was gonna get to that too. I got to that.
Well, I mean, we knew that when we agreed in the last meeting, that's when they would give us the final report. So that's not new news. I mean, that date isn't.
But not to get off topic, which is what we're discussing next Tuesday, so I apologize. In terms of how we're gonna still address John Richter next
Right.
Tuesday, it's just, I guess it's the scale in which we go into it versus.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we should put the budget as the first thing we discuss and do John Richter last.
So, I mean, certainly, we will follow the will of the board. Again, my thinking, teaching and learning, I mean, student achievement, that's who we are, that's what we do. And I think that always sets perspective. You know, that's what we're in business to do, is to educate children. And so for me, where we are in educating children, the student performance should always be the lead, because I don't like questions and discussions to start about money and buildings before we look at how are we faring in student performance. That's just.
I kind of agree. Remember the training in Richmond? She said the 4 Vs for
Yeah.
academic achievement. If you're going to talk
Killer
about
bees,
academic
yeah.
achievement first, then is that showing the
I would,
difference in priority?
I would caution us as to how much time we spend on number 1 then, and make sure that it is focused, and we don't get sidetracked with different questions that may not have anything to do with academic achievement. And then I say we talk about budget next, and then leave John Richter for last. Would anybody else, would you all support that?
Try to cut it, so.
I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think that's fine, but we also have to leave time for discussion. We just can't talk at city council for.
Yeah, what is it, from
6
2 to what?
2 to 4.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, it seems like I heard recently, it's gonna be more 90 minutes than
Right.
2 hours.
So-
you know?
I think we should have, what, an hour, hour 10 of real presentation?
Yeah, the
That was good.
presentation, and one of the things we've learned over the years with this is that the presentation should definitely be high level and brief.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
And not, too detailed.
Right.
You know.
We can leave the detail behind. They
Right.
can have it later to read.
And of course, here's the reality. They're gonna ask what they're interested in.
Sure.
Ask about what they're interested in, and not what we were saying.
And on that note, that's why I had made the comment,
Yeah.
the budget for them to
Yeah.
go in, and letting them know clearly what our needs are,
Mhm.
and have
We won't
lots
know.
of.
That's my point, we won't know on February 4th.
We won't know, but we can at least give them the beginnings of what some of the estimates are. We can at least
Right.
start the conversation.
Yeah.
And what makes up the 14 million and the additional?
Right, exactly. We
But
can
let
start the
us never
conversation.
get sidetracked. Number 1 is what we do. It's the meat and potatoes of our work, and for me, it sets the
Right.
perspective for everything else.
Right, I totally agree.
So, maybe I will just belabor it.
And we have to leave 15 minutes, it's 5 to 6, and we have to leave 15 minutes for our agenda planning,
Well,
so.
Okay.
I mean, it's on the table.
I mean, no, I'm fine. My children are 33 and 30, respectively, so. Go ahead.
In their home?
They're very independent. For the record.
I think we kind of talked about this at our retreat. I think we, in my view, fall into this trap
Mhm.
We just spent 4 or 5 hours going through a lot of stuff
Mhm.
that we have to absorb, that we've asked Dr. Thornton, the superintendent, and the executive team to go back, massage, and give us some feedback for our meeting on the 5th. To leapfrog ahead or what's that terminology? Is I just think is not good practice.
But
So how, you all are going to work together as a team. I just think that
trust that we hear you loud and clear on this. I mean, I don't want you to think that there's this made up mind on this side of the table saying, no, we're gonna say what we're planning to say no matter what you say. No, I hear you loud and clear.
I'm just responding like we were just talking about some of the things, giving them a heads up on what we think some of these issues are. Personally, I don't think we're ready to do that.
Okay, I see what you're
And
saying.
once you open that door, then questions are going to come. And I don't think it's anything wrong
Right.
with saying we just aren't prepared at this time to go into that area. And people, they might not like it, but I would rather be straightforward, and we talk about being transparent with where we are, than to open up the door and then look less than having our act together, than trying to address things that as a board we have not even decided upon. Just a caution, that's all.
If I could, and I'm just gonna say this flat out, city council's been asking about us and their budget priorities, our budget priorities for months and months and months. They're asking us that question. And so, we're still on Tuesday, not likely to be able to answer that question, which I don't think is frankly satisfactory, but I don't think we can yet.
But they were closer based on our discussion today.
We are, but I'm just saying out loud, they have been asking this question of us for months.
But aren't these our budget priorities plus whatever things we just said we were gonna add?
That there's no financial associated with that sheet. So my point is, we still can't say 1, 2, and 3 equal X amount of dollars.
Right, and so to me, if the question is, what are your priorities? These are the priorities that we're working on. What are the details? We're in the process of working that out. So at least we have given the snapshot of these things that we're giving attention and focus to, even though we're still working through the process of all the details. I mean, there may be some things that, like Dr. Thornton described with the state and other things, we know we can speak to with certainty, with BRS and those other things. These are our priorities, but again, unless something miraculously happens between now and February 3rd, I just think if we go beyond that, we just create a different can of worms, and for whatever the board decides to do is fine. Just from past experience,
Sure.
and just based upon some of the things we talked about, I don't want to, and even, Dr. King said earlier about the scenario that he was in last year, I don't want to put him in a different scenario unnecessarily, just because we happen to get the invitation at this point in time. We could have gotten the invitation February 20th.
Okay. I'll do the consent.
Will
Okay.
we get a copy of the final presentation by Monday or so?
I mean, I'm do it, so.
I can't commit to it.
Okay. All right, and I think, our last couple of meetings, I think have been good meetings. I mean, there've been some difficult ones. The last couple of meetings have been good meetings. I anticipated a good meeting on Tuesday, I really do. But again, take everything that you offered into consideration. Okay, so here's what I'm recommending at this point. There are a couple of items that we need to touch on. I would say that anything that staff doesn't have to be here for, that we respect what we've said earlier. That's what I suggest. And if the board wants to walk quickly through the budget, I would ask respectfully that we would try very hard as we just look at, and Janelle and I would walk through these categories, the budget for last year, projected budget for next year, justification and explanation, then we take it and think about it, and that we try not to delve into this with both hands and feet today. We'll be at 10 o'clock tonight.
And you're speaking of the school board
Our
budget.
school board budget.
Right.
that, you know.
I'm fine, because Brad and Warren are not here, and they don't have that in front of them.
So we would at least, so while Janelle is passing that out, let's look quickly, because these are the only other things that made. Oh, what did I just do?
Just said two.
Oh,
So
okay.
Dr. Houston, are we saying that folks that don't need to stay here for the conversation are welcome to join their families at home?
And I'm gonna say, just before they do so, yes, yes.
Since I'm on the front.
Yeah, that answer is yes, but here's what I wanna say just
meter's
before.
running.
just
We
before-
want to thank them.
We do wanna thank them. So I guess there's two things I wanna say.
Yeah, we want to thank you for coming in today. Thank you.
Yes, and for all you do, but I also wanna say that as we talk about the fifth budget, there are one or two people, or two or three people, three or four people, that may impact. So let's look quickly at the agenda for the fifth. Very quickly, that the current agenda included our, let me call it, typical work session approach, where we get the reports from each of the departments. We put community engagement at the top there, because for the last two meetings, we have not gotten to their report, and so I wanted to make sure we got to that, and it's happened once to Human Resources as well.
Well,
That's
Human Resources has guests coming in to do that paid classification study,
correct.
so that's why.
Yes. Thank you, Janelle.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, I would just ask, if there are any recommendations for consideration or changes to the fifth agenda. Yes, Linda?
We do not have the academic review from the State Department of Education. We
Mhm.
were going to provide that
Okay,
report, so we could substitute something for that.
okay.
Dr. Houston,
Yes,
if I may, I have guests coming in from out of town, and so if you will be changing the discussion involved in the pay and classification study, if you'll let me know so I can make contact with our colleagues in Northern Virginia.
we don't anticipate changing that, and you're number 2 on that agenda, and right now, we don't anticipate changing that. Unless there's a different recommendation. I mean, here's one of the things we've talked about in terms of our 5-year plan, which is very important to our work here.
Under school improvement, can we get an update on the latest cohort grant applications?
The final application is due on January 31st. So, sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
So we wouldn't get the academic review, and we would get that update on, state that again?
The latest SIG cohort
Yeah.
proposals.
Mhm.
State.
SIG.
SIG.
School
Oh,
improvement.
SIG, Elder Square, SIG.
You gonna add that?
The
Okay.
KPMG presentation is 15 minutes, doesn't require any action, but it would get it done.
I had it
I
down
thought
for
we had it there. The
For when?
19th.
For the 19th.
It's 15 minutes, doesn't require any action, and would get it done. And really, they like to get it presented publicly to the board within 60 days of the date of the report. The date of the report is December the 20th, which is the official audit report date.
Okay. Is there any objection to that? Okay.
Section 6.
Down to 3.05, well, these folks will be coming in. Trying to think if we need to move it up higher on the agenda, since that would include guests as well. Okay,
What was that, Dr. Houston?
so we would try to move it up higher in the agenda since it would.
To the 5th?
Sorry,
On the 5th, you mean?
yes, and earlier on the agenda.
Now, I could just ask, give them an idea what time they should be here if you wanted to leave it in the same
But if
location.
it's only 15 minutes and your guests coming in.
I think we put them,
Yeah,
yeah, we
we
put
do.
them up.
Okay.
What
closer to
about
the
after
front.
community engagement, before HR?
Yeah, because they've got folks coming in for HR as well. Well, we
If
can make
theirs
them
is only
number 2.
15 minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no need to have those other people sitting and waiting.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts?
item number 4, budget review, that.
No, that's for.
Those are agenda items for review
Right.
for the 19th meeting.
Exactly, that's not for that same day.
So you had mentioned that at every meeting that we have, we need to have some budget discussion. So in this work session, are we allotting any time for budget discussion?
No, and we need to.
Well, let's remember, Dr. Houston, that the superintendent mid-year evaluation timing,
It's based on this.
well, it's changed.
Right, exactly.
So we do have time on this day technically.
If we wanted to start a little earlier. That's
Well, no.
changed.
Well, remember, as a result of the new the assessment tool, we talked about
Right,
changing.
I just, and it's in everybody's email now.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I did send it out in terms of the change. I guess what I'm saying, what I think I hear you saying is that we can still start at the time we were scheduled to begin.
Start at 12.
Right, is that what I hear you saying,
Mhm.
Courtney? And,
Do we just need to say clearly, though, what the schedule is for the superintendent evaluation and assessment tool is, so that people understand, do we actually need this time on the 5th as much as we see on the agenda?
You're saying, do we need 1.5 hours?
Exactly. Can we use that to do budget?
yes, we can. Yes, we can replace that with anything we want to if we wanted to still start it at 12. So is that what I hear? We want, we wouldn't be doing the superintendent's evaluation. You have the information relative to that in your email now. And so the question is, do we want to still start at 12?
Right, yes. we
Okay,
should.
the answer is yes. Okay, then we can determine what matters relative to the budget we're going to discuss. I don't think we need to hold the folks any longer for that, but we can, we can formulate that between now and Wednesday, but we just know that we want to include budget discussion in this agenda. We can rework it. We can work out the details of that. Okay?
Yeah, we might want to just think about what we want to get out of that particular discussion, because if we're waiting for Dr. King's 19th budget, you know, if that's going to be the be all and all,
Yeah.
you know, so what would we want to accomplish?
But I think that's something via email and whatnot, we can,
Maybe we can discuss the school board budget during that time.
and not tonight?
Yeah, you said we're just going to review it.
Right.
And then we're going to think about it, and then.
Right. I'm trying to release them, so I'm thinking we can figure that piece of it out without holding staff. Okay, and that's a good idea too, the school board budget discussion based on what we receive and review in the next couple of days. I think that's would be a good use of that time. Okay? Any other thoughts before we thank again? Yes, it's no problem at all. And we signing off in terms of our live feed here. Okay, yes. Thank you guys so much. You know, this is a sacrifice for everyone, and thank you.